Since the dawn of time, human beings have searched for the perfect partner. The idea of a soul-deep connection, of a love that completes us, has been at the heart of countless stories, myths, and philosophies. But what if I told you that many of the relationships we consider ideal are actually reflections of our deepest inner conflicts? Carl Jung, one of the greatest explorers of the human psyche, left us a powerful warning. We don't choose our partners randomly. More often than not, we choose, unconsciously, those who mirror our unresolved wounds, our hidden fears, and even the darkest corners of our shadow. Think about it. Have you ever wondered why you keep ending up in relationships that leave you feeling unfulfilled, confused, or even trapped? Why, despite your best intentions, do you find yourself emotionally drained? If you've ever had the sense that you're with the wrong person, it may not be fate's mistake, but rather an invitation to look within yourself. Jung believed that the unconscious plays a crucial role in our relationships. While our conscious mind seeks safety, comfort, and companionship, our unconscious operates on an entirely different level. It seeks wholeness, and in its quest to make us whole, it draws us toward people who, instead of healing us, often intensify our pain. That's why the first step in knowing whether you're with the wrong person is not to look outward, but inward. Examine the emotions that surface in your relationship. Do you constantly feel insecure? Do you find yourself fighting for love or validation? Do you have an unshakable feeling that something isn't right, even if you can't quite put it into words? These are not random feelings. They are the language of your unconscious, trying to speak to you. Jung saw relationships as mirrors of our inner world. The qualities we admire in others are often parts of ourselves that we've repressed or left undeveloped. But the same is true for the traits that irritate, wound, or anger us. The things that disturb us most about our partners are often projections of our own shadows, the parts of ourselves we've denied or disowned. So when you feel like you're with the wrong person, the most important question to ask yourself is, what part of me is being reflected in this relationship? What patterns am I repeating? What lessons am I refusing to learn? It's hard to accept, but many of our relationships are not the result of bad luck. They are the outcome of unconscious programming that leads us to seek out the familiar, even when the familiar is painful. This is where Jung's concept of the shadow comes into play. The shadow is everything we've repressed, denied, or avoided in ourselves. And ironically, the person we fall in love with is often the one who embodies what we've rejected within us. If you grew up feeling deeply insecure, you might be drawn to someone who constantly makes you question your worth. If you experienced childhood neglect or felt invisible, you might find yourself in relationships where you have to fight to be seen. The shadow doesn't choose healthy relationships. It chooses what feels familiar, what confirms our deepest, often painful beliefs about love and about ourselves. That's why, when you feel like you're with the wrong person, it's not just about them. It's about the part of you that brought you to that experience. But here lies the key. Just because a relationship reflects your wounds doesn't mean you're doomed to suffer. On the contrary, Jung saw difficult relationships as opportunities for transformation. When you have the courage to face what your relationship is revealing about you, you gain the power to change your story. The problem is that most people don't want to look within. They'd rather blame the other person, hold on to the hope that love will fix everything, or believe that with enough patience, things will get better. But Jung warned that there can be no evolution without awareness. Until you become conscious of the patterns that drive you to choose unfulfilling relationships, you'll keep repeating them. And this is when everything starts to make sense. It's no coincidence that you feel frustrated, exhausted, or even lost in your relationship. It's not about luck or destiny. It's about patterns that have been silently operating in your unconscious for a long time. Jung didn't speak of the unconscious as some abstract idea. He saw it as a living force that influences every part of our lives, especially our relationships. And one thing the unconscious does remarkably well is draw us back again and again into the same experiences until we learn. If you feel like you're with the wrong person, there's a deeper reason behind that. Perhaps your relationship isn't based on authenticity, but on need. Jung taught that when a person hasn't developed their own sense of identity, they'll seek completion through another. They'll be drawn to someone who fills their emotional gaps, who gives them the validation, safety, or sense of purpose they haven't found within themselves. This is one of love's most dangerous traps. True love isn't about finding someone who completes you. It's about sharing your completeness with another. But most people don't enter relationships from a place of wholeness. They come from a place of lack. And when two people with unresolved wounds come together, what they create is not love, it's dependency. That's where the real problems begin. In a relationship built on need, imbalance is inevitable. One person will always feel like they're giving more than they're receiving. The other will feel like nothing is ever enough. Power struggles emerge. Subtle, or not so subtle, manipulation takes root. And soon, both people are trapped in a cycle of unmet expectations. This doesn't mean all relationships are doomed to fail, but it does mean that many don't start from a healthy place. And the only way to break free from these destructive patterns is to do what Jung urged us to do. Look within. If you feel like you're with the wrong person, ask yourself, am I with them because I love them or because I need them? Does this relationship help me grow or does it keep me stuck? Do I feel free in this connection or trapped in a dynamic I can't escape? Love should not feel like a constant battle. Yes, every relationship has its challenges, but there's a big difference between facing challenges together and feeling like you're fighting alone just to make things work. When you're with the wrong person, the relationship consumes more energy than it gives. It wears you down. It drains you. And worst of all, deep down, you already know it. Carl Jung believed that intuition was one of the most powerful forms of communication between the conscious and the unconscious mind. But the reality is that most people have been trained to ignore it. They've been conditioned to believe they must always give it another chance, that every relationship requires effort, and that love conquers all. But here's the truth. If you have to convince yourself that a relationship is right, then it probably isn't. You don't need to come up with reasons to justify true love, because when you're with the right person, things just flow. That doesn't mean everything will be perfect or free of challenges. But healthy love feels light, natural, and uplifting. It doesn't keep you in a constant state of anxiety, self-doubt, or emotional exhaustion. When you're with the wrong person, you feel it in every corner of your being. You see it in the way you argue, in the lack of deep connection, in the unmet expectations, and in the way you slowly lose your sense of self just to try and make the relationship work. And this is where so many people get stuck. They keep telling themselves that things will get better, that time will fix everything. But Jung would argue that change doesn't happen without awareness. And if you keep ignoring the signs, the only thing that will truly change is your ability to tolerate what you should have never been tolerating in the first place. It's hard, so hard, to accept that someone you love might not be right for you. It's painful to let go of the idea of what could have been. But here's the most important part. Holding on to something that isn't right for you only takes you further away from what truly is. When you choose to release what no longer serves your soul, something truly magical begins to happen. Not immediately, because letting go is also a process of grief. But slowly, quietly, you begin to feel lighter. Your energy starts to return. Your mind becomes clearer. You realize that you were living in denial, trying to justify something that deep down you knew wasn't working. And in that moment of clarity, you finally understand what Jung was trying to teach all along. The most radical act of self-love is choosing yourself. You cannot build a healthy relationship with someone else if you haven't first built one with yourself. You can't expect another person to fill the voids that only you have the power to heal. And you absolutely cannot stay in a relationship that is hurting you just because you're afraid of what comes next. The wrong person will make you question your worth, your essence, and your inner knowing. The right person will inspire you to become the best version of yourself without ever asking you to lose your authenticity in the process. If you feel that you're in the wrong relationship, trust what you feel. You don't need more proof. You don't need more excuses. You don't need more time to see if anything changes. The real question is, how much longer are you going to ignore what you already know deep inside? The answer to that question might just be the beginning of the greatest transformation of your life. When you're stuck in a relationship that feels off, that feels misaligned, it's so easy to get lost in your own confusion. Sometimes you convince yourself that it's all in your head, that maybe you're just being dramatic, that if you try a little harder, if you give it a little more time, maybe things will finally shift. But deep down, you know something's not right. And that feeling, that persistent, unshakable feeling, isn't a fantasy. It's your unconscious mind screaming at you, trying to tell you a truth you may not yet be ready to face. Jung taught us that the unconscious is always trying to communicate with us, even if we don't immediately understand the message. Maybe lately, you've felt more exhausted than usual. Maybe it's been hard to sleep. Your dreams have turned restless, or there's this strange emptiness growing inside you. These aren't random sensations. They're signals, manifestations of an inner conflict, a quiet part of you that recognizes something fundamental in your relationship is no longer aligned with your true self. When you're with the wrong person, you slowly begin to lose your essence. Without realizing it, you start silencing your thoughts, hiding your desires, toning down your personality, just to avoid conflict or to keep the relationship going. But that's the trap. The moment you feel like you have to change who you are just to be accepted, you've already stepped away from real love. Because real love doesn't require you to leave parts of yourself behind. Real love welcomes all of you. Maybe you've caught yourself justifying behaviors that if they happen to a close friend, you'd immediately see as unacceptable. Maybe you've told yourself that no one is perfect, that all couples go through problems, or that this is just how relationships work. But there's a difference between the natural challenges that every relationship faces and the emotional erosion that wears you down, little by little. If a relationship makes you feel small instead of expansive, if it brings more anxiety than peace, if it leads you to question your own worth over and over again, then it's time to ask yourself the hard question: is this the relationship I really want for my life. Jung believed the unconscious never stays silent. If you ignore its messages, they begin to show up more intensely through anxiety, sudden sadness, repeating conflicts, or even psychosomatic illness. The body always finds a way to express what the mind is trying to suppress. One of the clearest signs that you're in the wrong relationship is that you feel stuck in a cycle of emotional exhaustion rather than being in a space of growth and connection. The deeper problem is that many people have been taught to settle for incomplete love. They've grown up with the idea that love means sacrifice, that suffering is part of the deal, that if it doesn't hurt, it can't be real. But Jung would remind us that love isn't meant to be a battleground. It isn't supposed to be a place where you're constantly fighting to be seen, heard, or valued. Real love is a safe space, a place where you can be entirely yourself without fear, where you can grow without being held back, where your partner doesn't become an emotional weight, but rather a fellow traveler walking beside you. And yes, it's normal to be afraid of letting go. We cling to what we know, even when it's hurting us, even when deep down we're aware it's not right. The familiar often feels safer than the unknown. But this is exactly where Jung's concept of transformation comes in. He believed that true growth can only happen when we dare to release what no longer belongs to us. And even though letting go might be terrifying, it's also the very first step toward finding the life and the love that will truly fulfill us. If you've ever felt like your relationship is holding you back instead of lifting you up, if it leaves you drained instead of inspired, if it makes you doubt your path instead of giving you strength, then that's not something you should ignore. You don't need one more excuse, one more failed attempt, or one last justification. The real question isn't, can this relationship be fixed? The real question is, does this relationship allow me to be who I really am? And when you choose to listen to yourself, when you finally give more importance to your well-being than to the comfort of what's familiar, that's when you begin to reclaim your power. Because love, when it's real, doesn't dim your light. It helps you shine even brighter. Staying in a relationship that doesn't serve you causes something inside you to slowly shut down. At first, it's just a vague discomfort, a strange feeling you can't quite name. Then comes the emptiness, even when the other person is physically there. Eventually, that discomfort turns into dissatisfaction, into a deep internal conflict between what you genuinely feel and what you keep trying to rationalize. But the most dangerous part of all isn't the relationship itself. It's the silent, subtle process of self-abandonment that begins to unfold. Jung taught us that human beings have an innate need to find balance between their inner world and the face they show to the outside world. And yet, in the name of love, many people end up sacrificing their authenticity. They begin to silence their real thoughts, shrink their needs, and hide their truths, just to avoid upsetting the other person. And the tragedy is, this rarely happens all at once. It's slow, it's barely noticeable, like a candle that quietly burns down until one day, without realizing, it's gone out completely. You keep telling yourself this is normal, that all relationships have their tough moments, that all you need is patience. But there's a big difference between facing challenges together and losing yourself along the way. And at some point, you have to ask yourself, is this love, or is it just the fear of being alone? Jung would say that when a relationship demands you to suppress your intuition, when it asks you to silence your inner voice and disregard what you truly feel. It's no longer love, but a prison disguised as companionship. And that's the core issue. We often confuse love with habit, with loyalty, with the belief that just because we've invested years, energy, and effort into someone, we owe it to ourselves to stay. But time spent in something that doesn't nourish you is not a reason to remain. The only real reason to stay in a relationship is if it helps you grow, if it inspires you, if it supports you without suffocating you, if it allows you to be yourself without constantly asking you to become someone you're not. Maybe you've found yourself justifying behaviors that, in any other context, you would never accept. Maybe you've taught yourself to minimize the pain, saying, "It's not that bad," or "Nobody's perfect," or "Everyone has flaws." But the problem isn't really the other person. It's that you've learned to tolerate what should never have been tolerable in the first place. When you're in a relationship where you constantly feel like you have to fight to be understood, when it seems like you're giving more than you're receiving, when the connection feels more like a struggle than a natural flow, that's a clear sign that something is not in alignment with your true essence. The unconscious mind is wise. It finds subtle ways to speak to you when your conscious mind refuses to listen. It communicates through exhaustion, through that underlying sense of dissatisfaction, through that quiet sadness you can't explain, especially when, from the outside, everything seems fine. You can't lie to yourself forever. You can rationalize, justify, come up with excuses, but your unconscious always knows, and if you continue to ignore it, it will make itself heard in louder, more painful ways. If you feel that something doesn't sit right in your relationship, trust that feeling. You don't need undeniable proof. You don't need a dramatic event to validate your intuition. Jung would tell us that the simple fact of feeling resistance inside you, of feeling trapped, is already enough of a sign. That alone is your inner voice, whispering that maybe this isn't the right place for you. And yet, the hardest question arises. What do you do when you realize you're with the wrong person? Because knowing it is one thing, but doing something about it, that's an entirely different story. And this is where most people freeze. It's the fear of change, of emptiness, of not knowing what comes next, that keeps so many tied to relationships that haven't felt like home in a long time. The mind plays cruel tricks at this stage. It whispers that maybe this is as good as it gets, that you just need to try harder, one more time, that if you walk away, you'll regret it forever. But Jung taught that life is a constant process of transformation, and every time you resist change, you move further away from your own evolution. Letting go isn't easy, but holding on to something that's harming you only prolongs your pain. So the real question is not whether the other person will change, or if things might get better, or if someday everything could be different. The real question is, do I want to keep living like this? Because in the end, it's not about the other person. It's about you, about how much you value your peace, about how much respect you have for your own feelings, about how deeply you trust that there is something better for you out there. The greatest act of self-love is having the courage to let go of what no longer serves you, even if a part of you still clings to it. Because love, when it's real, doesn't feel like an inner war. It doesn't leave you drained or make you question your worth. When you're with the right person, you just know, not because everything is perfect, but because peace has taken the place of struggle. That's where Jung's most powerful lesson lies. The most important relationship you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself. Don't sacrifice that relationship out of fear of being alone. Don't hold on to something just because it once meant something, or because you're scared of letting go. Because only when you're at peace with who you are will you attract someone who reflects that peace. Someone who adds calm to your life, not chaos. If you feel deep down that you're with the wrong person, then you already have the answer. The only question left is, how much longer are you going to ignore it? And at that point, it all comes down to a choice. Not about the other person, not about what could have been, not about the time you've invested. It's about you, about how willing you are to listen to yourself, about how much you value your peace of mind, about how deeply you trust that you deserve more than a relationship rooted in struggle, sacrifice, and uncertainty. Carl Jung taught us that life doesn't push us into suffering out of cruelty or randomness. Every experience we go through, even the pain of being with the wrong person, serves a deeper purpose. That purpose is to awaken us, but awakening doesn't happen just by knowing the truth. It happens when we take action. It happens when we stop lying to ourselves, when we face fear directly and choose authenticity over comfort. It's easy to fall into the trap of believing that love must involve suffering, that we have to endure it, that happiness will come eventually if we're just patient enough. But real happiness doesn't lie in waiting for something outside of us to change. It lies in changing ourselves, in making the decision that we deserve better, in trusting that there is a kind of love out there that won't make us question our worth, that won't make us beg for affection or validation, that won't leave us wondering if we're enough. If there's one thing you take away from all of this, let it be this: you don't need any more reasons to leave a place where you are not happy. You don't need more proof. You don't need more excuses. You don't need to give it one last try just to make sure. The only evidence you ever really need is how you feel. Because when something is right for you, you feel it. In your mind, in your body, in your spirit. And when something isn't, you feel that too, even if it's painful to admit. True love doesn't ask you to choose between being yourself and being with someone. It doesn't make you fight for visibility, or struggle to be heard, or beg to be understood. It doesn't leave you questioning every single day if you're in the right place or with the right person. Healthy love is a space of calm, not a source of anxiety. It allows you to breathe deeply, not walk on eggshells. It lifts you rather than weighs you down. And now it's your turn. It doesn't matter how many times you ignored the signs in the past. It doesn't matter how long you stayed in a relationship that didn't nurture your soul. The only thing that matters is what you choose to do now, in this moment. Because every single day, you have the chance to choose yourself, to break the patterns that have kept you stuck, to walk away from what hurts, to build a life where love isn't something you have to survive. It's something that feels like home, a refuge, not a war zone. And if this message resonated with you, if something deep within you stirred while listening, then maybe it's because your soul has been waiting for this very reminder. Maybe it's not just about you. Maybe you know someone else who's silently struggling in a relationship that drains them more than it nurtures them. If so, don't keep this to yourself. Share it. Pass it on. You never know whose life you might be saving just by offering them a moment of clarity, a moment of reflection, a moment of truth. There are countless people out there stuck in relationships that slowly dim their light, relationships that suffocate their essence, that chip away at their joy, that make them feel smaller, unworthy, or invisible. They stay because they're afraid. Afraid of loneliness, afraid of change, afraid of starting over. But sometimes staying is the real danger. Sometimes holding on is far more painful than letting go. That's why this message is so important. Because someone needs to hear it. Someone needs to be reminded that they're not crazy for wanting more, that their peace matters, that love should never feel like a prison, that it's okay to walk away from what no longer aligns with their soul. So I invite you to pause for a moment and reflect. What part of this message touched your heart the most? Was there a sentence, a feeling, a truth that shook something loose inside you? If there was, don't keep it bottled up. Leave a comment, let it out, speak your truth. Because your story, yes, your story, might be the exact story someone else needs to hear right now to realize that they too are not alone, that there's hope, that change is possible. And ask yourself honestly, what decision are you ready to make today to reclaim your peace? What's one boundary you're finally willing to set? One pattern you're ready to break? One step you're brave enough to take? Even if your voice trembles and your heart races. Because the truth is, deep down, we always know when a relationship isn't right for us. We feel it in our bodies, in the way we lose sleep, in the way we walk on eggshells, in the way we silence ourselves just to keep the peace, in the way we second-guess our worth. And even though we try to convince ourselves to stay, the truth doesn't go away. It just gets louder and heavier until we finally have no choice but to listen. So what is your truth trying to tell you right now? Remember, your story has power, more than you think. Sharing your experience can inspire others who are walking the same path you once walked, scared, confused, unsure. You could be the voice they need to find their own strength. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the upcoming videos. Together, we'll keep diving deep into the human mind, into relationships, and into the journey of creating a life that feels real, not perfect, but authentic, not easy, but aligned. A life where peace isn't a luxury, but a daily choice. Transformation begins with you. So don't wait any longer to choose yourself. We'll meet again in the next video. Many believe that what holds them back lies outside themselves. The money they don't have, the opportunity that never arrives, the person who betrayed them. They blame the past, the system, or luck. Yet what they fail to see is that the real prison lies within. It's not the circumstances that paralyze them, but the beliefs they repeat, the excuses they defend, and the stories they tell themselves to justify why they haven't moved forward. I, Carl Jung, came to understand that the mind can be the most powerful instrument in the world, or the most merciless jailer. Every negative thought you cling to, every fear you refuse to confront, every judgment you never question becomes another bar in that invisible cell. And the cruelest part is that no one else locked you there. You did it, with your words, your habits, and your decisions. But if you place the bars, you can also break them, because your mind is not your enemy. It is your territory, waiting for you to reclaim it. Not tomorrow, today. For years, thousands have walked with their shoulders bent, their gaze low, and their hearts dimmed, not because the world defeated them, but because their own minds kept them imprisoned. The most tragic thing about this prison is not that it's invisible, it's that it's comfortable, familiar, and silent. It's built from repetitive thoughts never questioned, from inherited beliefs accepted as absolute truths from old wounds never healed that now serve as justifications for stagnation. And so the days pass, with the key in their pocket, yet the door remains unopened. The mind can be a cruel cell. It needs no real bars, only limiting convictions. I'm not enough. I'll never make it. That's not for me. Small phrases, yes, but repeated again and again, year after year, reinforced by every failure, every criticism, every excuse. They solidify into structure, into a system of self-sabotage. And the longer you live inside it, the more convinced you become that this confinement is reality, that there is no other option, that this is your destiny. But it's not. You weren't born with those beliefs. You didn't come into the world afraid to speak, feeling incapable, or thinking yourself unworthy of love, success, or abundance. All of that was learned, programmed, installed by experiences, by others' voices, by misunderstood failures. And what was learned can be unlearned. It can be rewritten. But only if you dare to look inward, to see your mind for what it truly is, a malleable, trainable, and directable structure, a powerful tool that, if not mastered, will master you. Think about the decisions you've avoided, the opportunities you've let pass, the paths you never took. Was it truly that you couldn't? Or was it your mind whispering that it wasn't the right time, that you weren't capable, that you weren't ready? That's the language of the mental prison. Procrastination disguised as logic, fear disguised as prudence, low self-esteem disguised as humility. And every time you obey that voice, you reinforce your bars, you weld the gate shut, you shrink yourself without anyone demanding it. The harshest truth is that you are both prisoner and warden, because no one enters your mind without your permission. No one sustains those beliefs but you. You can change them, you can shatter them, but not unless you first recognize they exist, that they've been living inside you, that they're not part of your essence, but have become part of your routine. And like all routines, they feel normal, but they're not. They're distortions, learned limitations, ready to be dismantled. The first step to freedom isn't running, it's seeing. Seeing how you think, from where you decide, how you speak to yourself. Because your inner dialogue is either the blueprint of your prison or the map of your liberation. And if you begin to change it, even a little each day, you'll start loosening the chains, not from the outside, but from within. Because there is no stronger prison than the one you cannot see, yet no greater freedom than the one you grant yourself. And you can do it. For if your mind built this cage, your awareness can destroy it. The mind is an extraordinary tool, capable of building empires, solving complex problems, transforming entire realities. But it can also do the opposite: sabotage, reduce, and paralyze you. Everything depends on who is in control. Because when you don't lead your mind leads you, and not with force, but with subtlety. It whispers, "Better not try." It recalls your past failures as if they were prophecies of the future. It shows you only the fragments of reality that confirm your fears, your doubts, your sense of inadequacy. And while that happens, you live under the illusion of being realistic, when in truth, you're simply conditioned. Every repeated negative thought becomes a silent command. The mind doesn't distinguish between what you say with intent and what you repeat unconsciously. It records it all, transforms it all into inner structure. That's why, if day after day you tell yourself, "I'm useless, I always fail, I don't have what it takes," it doesn't vanish into thin air. It becomes self-concept, identity. And identity is what most determines how you act, decide, and how far you go. Not because it's true, but because you believed it. Observe your daily behavior. How many times have you stopped yourself before trying something new? How many times have you felt inspired by an idea, only to convince yourself minutes later that it won't work? That isn't intuition. It's mental habit, a network of limiting thoughts reinforced by every misunderstood experience. And the painful part is that every time you stop, every time you quit, every time you say, "I can't," your mind feels validated. It says, "See, I told you," and so the cycle continues. But it can be broken, because every mental habit can be uninstalled if replaced with a new one and sustained with conviction. It's not about repeating empty affirmations. It's about declaring a new truth with emotion, even when it doesn't feel real at first. Because the mind does not transform through logic. It transforms through emotional repetition. If every day you tell your mind, "I'm ready, I'm prepared, I'm growing," eventually it will believe you. And when it does, you'll realize that the prison was never real. It was always made of thought. Your mind will not be able to ignore it. At first, it will resist. Then, it will accept. And finally, it will make it part of you. You are not weak for having limiting thoughts. We all do. What makes you a prisoner is not the thought itself, but the automatic obedience to it. The blind belief in what your mind repeats. That the psyche's greatest illusion is to believe that every thought it produces is truth. Freedom begins when you realize that you are not your thoughts, but the observer of them. That is why mental freedom is not achieved by eliminating every negative idea, but by developing the capacity to choose which ones deserve your attention and which do not. You cannot control what arises in your mind, but you can decide what to nourish. And what you nourish grows. That is your responsibility, your power, your way out. Because no matter how many years you've lived inside that mental prison, what matters is that right now, in this very moment, you can begin to build the key. And that key has never been outside. It lies in every thought you choose to sustain, in every belief you dare to challenge, in every brave decision you take despite fear. True freedom never feels safe. It feels uncomfortable, but it also feels alive, authentic, real. And once you choose it, no cell will ever be able to contain you. The hardest prison to recognize is the one built with thoughts that sound reasonable. They don't shout or insult you. They disguise themselves as prudence, as maturity, as common sense. They whisper things like, "It's not the right time. I don't want to risk it now. Maybe later." And without realizing it, you start justifying your paralysis with words that sound intelligent, but are soaked in fear. Fear of failing, fear of changing, fear of seeing yourself in the mirror without excuses to protect you. That is the most dangerous cell, the one that feels logical. And why does it hurt so much to realize this? Because it means accepting that it was never the circumstances that held you back. It was you, your mind, your interpretation of reality. Every failure was not a sentence, but a signal. Yet your mind, trained for survival instead of growth, turned it into a reason to stop trying. And that is understandable. No one likes to fail. No one enjoys feeling vulnerable. But if you let that fear dictate your choices, your life becomes an endless repetition. Safe, predictable, lifeless. Look around you. How many talented, capable, extraordinary people live far below their potential? Not because of lack of opportunity, but because their mind convinced them that it's too late, that it's impossible, that it's not meant for them. And the worst part? After years of living under that internal dialogue, they stop hearing it. They accept it as their voice, as part of who they are. And when that happens, the prison no longer needs bars. The person becomes their own guard. But that can change. Everything can change when one new belief takes root. Not everything I think is true. If you practice this idea daily, it can crack even the thickest walls. It allows you to question, to give yourself permission not to believe everything your mind says. And in that questioning, the first breath of freedom appears, a small gap through which light enters. That tiny opening shows you that you can act even while doubting, move forward even when afraid, begin even without guarantees. No negative thought disappears by magic, but it loses its power when you face it and refuse to obey. When you listen to it, yet still choose to do what you know you must, that is when the bars begin to bend. Not through shouting, not through running away, but through conscious action, through movement born of awareness. By reminding yourself, again and again, that your mind can become your ally, but only if you train it to follow your command. That mastery is not achieved in a day. It is built every day, with every choice, with every challenged thought, with every time you say, I know I'm afraid, but I'll do it anyway. That is the difference between the man who remains trapped and the one who becomes free. It's not that one has limiting thoughts and the other doesn't. It's that one believes them and the other confronts them. And that repeated confrontation, with strength, with intention, with devotion, destroys any prison. Because if you built your cage with thoughts, you can also build wings with decisions. And those wings not only take you out of the prison, they lead you toward a life worth living. A life that feels real, chosen, truly yours. One of the mind's cruelest tricks is its ability to make limitation feel normal. When you've lived too long with certain fears, beliefs, or self-imposed boundaries, they begin to feel like identity. You no longer say, I feel afraid. You say, I'm just like this. You no longer say, this is hard for me. You say, this isn't for me. And that is when the prison becomes a home. No longer feeling like confinement, but personality. This is who I am, you tell yourself. And that is the most dangerous lie the mind can tell. Because when a person confuses their mental programming with their identity, they abandon the idea of change. They stop seeing transformation as possible. They begin to defend their comfort zone as if their life depended on it. But your life doesn't depend on that. It depends on the opposite, on your courage to question everything you've accepted as true, on your willingness to look inward and ask, is this thought really mine, or did I inherit it from someone who was also afraid? Does this belief serve me or limit me? Is this voice my intuition or a lingering echo from the past? To live free doesn't mean to be free from negative thoughts. It means to no longer submit to them, to stop building altars for them, to refuse to let them guide your steps. And that becomes possible only when you begin to intervene in your mind, like a muscle, until it learns to obey the strength of your consciousness rather than the noise of your fears. Because just as the body strengthens through repeated effort, the mind is reprogrammed through sustained intention. Knowing that your thoughts limit you is not enough. You must replace them. You must declare out loud every single day, if necessary, who you choose to become. Because if you don't speak it, your doubts will. And doubts are terrible guides for the soul. This isn't about deceiving yourself. It's about choosing which voice will lead your life. The one that diminishes you, or the one that pushes you forward. The one that paralyzes you, or the one that awakens you. Both exist within you. Both speak every day. but one of them will grow stronger, and it will always be the one you give more space, more attention, and more obedience to. Each time you choose to listen to the right voice, even if it's faint at first, that voice grows. It becomes more stable, more authoritative, until one day it's no longer a whisper. It becomes your new inner guide, your new identity. Not because it appeared magically, but because you built it consciously, step by step. And if these words are resonating with you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel, not just to receive more content, but to make a silent yet powerful commitment, to free your mind, day after day, thought after thought. Now I want you to write in the comments a phrase that has limited you for years. Write it, look at it, and then replace it with a new truth, one that you choose. Because the same words that once imprisoned you can also be the ones that set you free if you transform them. Remember this: you are not your story. You are not your past. You are not your fear. You are the man who decides what to do with all of it. And that choice, no matter how small, is your greatest act of power. Because when you change your inner dialogue, you change your destiny. When you break a single thought, you break a wall. When you affirm a new truth, every door begins to open, guiding you closer to the life waiting for you beyond the bars. A life that is real, free, and truly yours. Breaking your mental chains is not a moment of glory. It is a silent process, often uncomfortable, sometimes lonely. It doesn't happen in public. It happens when no one is watching, when you face your thoughts in the middle of the night, when you wrestle with that inner voice telling you it's not worth trying again, when you feel like you're moving but nothing seems to change. Right there, in that invisible crossroad between giving up and persisting, that's where true liberation begins. Because it's not about motivation, it's about a deep decision, not allowing your life to be dominated by mental structures you never consciously chose. There are thoughts you've carried for so long that you've stopped questioning them. They live in your tone of voice, in your posture, in the way you apologize for existing when you should be claiming your place. They've followed you into every project you never started, every conversation you avoided, every goal you abandoned. And though it seems those ideas are part of you, they are not. They are mental viruses, implanted without your consent, quietly sabotaging your power for years. But like all viruses, they can be eliminated. Not suddenly, but through a system, through discipline, awareness, and repetition. Begin by observing your language, because language reveals the map of your prison. Every time you say, "That's just the way I am," stop. Is that truly who you are? Or have you been trained to think that way? Are you introverted, or just afraid of being seen? Are you lazy, or have you lived too long without a purpose strong enough to wake you up with passion? Are you insecure, or simply echoing the criticism you heard as a child? If you never ask these questions, you'll keep living under labels that don't belong to you. And there is no prison more suffocating than a false label that becomes your identity. Change doesn't happen by shouting affirmations in the mirror once. It happens when, despite the discomfort, you act differently. When you commit to the new before the old consumes you. When you dare to think differently, speak differently, behave like the man you wish to be, even when your mind still resists. The mind doesn't update through intention alone, but through action. And when you act from your new truth, your mind has no choice but to adapt. Many people wait to feel different before doing something different. But those who truly free themselves do the opposite. They act differently to feel different. Even when they tremble, doubt themselves, or feel like imposters, they act anyway, because they understand that action creates evidence, and evidence transforms belief. You can tell yourself 1,000 times, "I am valuable," but what truly convinces the unconscious is when you act like a valuable being, when you defend your time, set boundaries, fulfill your promises. That's what breaks the walls of the mental prison. Not theory, but practice. Not desire, but action. So don't give up if fear still lingers within you. Don't judge yourself if your mind tries to return to the familiar cell. It's normal. It's part of the process. But don't mistake discomfort for failure. It's the opposite. It's a sign that you are moving forward, expanding the edges of your old self, disturbing the system that kept you asleep for years. And if you keep going, if you persist, if you act even while doubting, a moment will come when what once imprisoned you will no longer reach you. You will have grown beyond the bars, crossed an invisible threshold from which there is no turning back. And in that moment, you will finally be able to say with certainty, "Now, I am free." The mind seeks stability. It prefers what is known, even when it hurts, rather than the uncertainty that could set it free. That's why every time you step beyond your habitual patterns, your mind panics. It reminds you of every mistake, projects the worst possible outcome, exaggerates danger, diminishes your progress. But it doesn't do this because it hates you. It does it because it wants to protect you. Yet protecting you is not the same as liberating you. Sometimes the mind protects so fiercely that it ends up suffocating the soul. It builds walls around you, closes doors, clips your wings, all under the illusion of safety. But to live is not to be safe. To live is to be awake, exposed, vulnerable, open to whatever the day brings, without hiding behind excuses. For a mind trained for survival, that feels dangerous. It feels threatening. That's why so many men retreat into their prisons when life tests them. Not because they can't continue, but because they haven't learned to bear the discomfort of growth. Growth is, by its nature, painful. It breaks internal structures. It kills old versions of who you were. It forces you to face the parts of your life you abandoned out of fear. And here lies a brutal truth. If you are not willing to suffer for your freedom, you will suffer for your imprisonment. Because both paths hurt. One hurts in the beginning, the other hurts forever. One is the pain of change, the other is the pain of resignation. You choose, and when you choose the difficult path, the path of mental liberation, you need more than enthusiasm. You need sustained courage, emotional discipline, and the ability to observe your thoughts without becoming their servant. You must have the humility to accept that you are reprogramming yourself, that there will be days of confusion, of regression, of doubt. But every one of those days is worth it if they bring you closer to the truth of who you are meant to become. Start with something concrete. Identify one limiting belief that has quietly governed your life. Write it down. Read it. Then beside it, write a new statement, one that expands you, one that challenges you, one that feels too big but deeply true. And repeat it, not to convince others, but to train your mind, to show it a new direction, to remind it that freedom is not a dream, but a daily decision. And remember this, every act of courage, no matter how small, rewires your destiny. You are not here to live half asleep, chained by the fears of your past. You are here to rise, to expand, to become everything that your mind once told you was impossible. Freedom isn't a reward. It's a decision you make each day when you choose to act from your truth instead of your fear. So take a breath, lift your head, and keep walking toward the life that your higher self already knows is yours. Because the moment you dare to act differently, life begins to respond differently. If these words resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss the next message that your soul has been waiting to hear. Your awakening has already begun. Now, keep going.
Jung left us an invaluable legacy by showing us how to explore the deepest corners of our minds to overcome life's most complex challenges. One of the greatest emotional struggles we face is how to let go of someone who, despite having left our lives, continues to occupy a constant space in our minds. How can we release someone who seems to have become a persistent shadow in our consciousness? This is a deeply human question, and Jung offers us key insights to understand and heal. The reason why someone remains in your mind is not necessarily due to love or attachment, but because that person has become a symbol of something much deeper. Perhaps they represent an unhealed wound, a fear, an insecurity, or even a part of yourself that you have repressed. According to Jung, the unconscious uses symbols to communicate with us. The people we struggle to let go of are, in reality, mirrors reflecting unresolved aspects of our psyche. When you think about that person, what emotions arise? Is it sadness, anger, nostalgia, or a mixture of everything? These emotions are messages from your unconscious. It's not just about the other person, but about what they trigger within you. Instead of trying to suppress these feelings, Jung would invite you to explore them. What story is your mind trying to tell you? Ignoring these signals only prolongs suffering, while facing them with honesty can be the first step toward liberation. The process of letting go begins with accepting that this person is not meant to have a permanent place in your life. But accepting this is not an act of resignation. It is an act of profound self-love. Many times, we hold on to someone in our minds because we cling to an idea of what could have been. We torment ourselves with endless what-ifs and create imaginary scenarios that will never materialize. This attachment to the past prevents us from embracing the present and envisioning a different future. Jung teaches us that the unconscious acts as a silent companion on our journey, showing us what we need to confront in order to grow. If that person remains present in your mind, ask yourself, what lesson do I need to learn from this experience? What part of me needs healing or transformation? These are not easy questions to answer, but they are essential for moving forward. We often get trapped in obsessive thought patterns because we resist facing the shadows these people reveal within us. The shadow, as Jung defined it, consists of those parts of our personality that we prefer not to see, the aspect of ourselves that we have repressed because we believe they are unacceptable. But the more we ignore our shadow, the more control it has over our lives. The person occupying your mind may be a constant reminder of a shadow you need to integrate. When you begin working with your shadow, something powerful happens. You stop projecting your fears and insecurities onto others. Instead of blaming that person for how you feel, you start taking responsibility for your own emotions. This is a liberating act because it restores the power you had given away to that relationship. The path to liberation also requires self-compassion. Do not punish yourself for feeling this way. Recognize that you are in a healing process and that every emotion has a purpose. Instead of fighting against your feelings, accept them as a natural part of your human experience. This approach not only alleviates pain, but also opens a door to a deeper understanding of yourself. By accepting and exploring your emotions, you take a fundamental step toward self-knowledge. Carl Jung believed that the path to wholeness is not about eliminating pain, but about integrating it. By accepting pain as a necessary part of your experience, you uncover its purpose. Every emotion has something to teach you, and every person who leaves a mark on your life is a teacher. Even if their lesson is difficult to accept, integrating your shadows not only transforms your relationship with yourself, but also with the world around you. When you stop projecting your wounds onto others, you begin to see people as they truly are, not as a mere reflection of your own fears or desires. This shift in perspective is powerful because it allows you to connect with others from a place of authenticity, rather than from a need for validation or control. It is important to understand that letting go of someone does not mean forgetting what they meant to you. Relationships, even those that come to an end, are part of your story. To deny them would be to deny a part of yourself. However, you can honor those memories without allowing them to define you. Jung would say that the past holds value, not as an anchor that keeps you stuck, but as a beacon that illuminates a path toward your evolution. One of the most transformative tools that Jung left us is the practice of introspection. Dedicate time to sitting in silence with yourself and reflecting on what that person represents in your life. What emotions do they evoke? What recurring patterns do you notice? What aspects of yourself emerge when you think about them? This exercise is not easy, but it will help you understand the roots of your attachment and provide you with clarity to move forward. Liberation is not a linear process. There will be days when you feel like you have moved on, and others when emotions resurface with intensity. This is normal. Jung reminds us that personal growth does not happen instantly, but rather in layers. Each time you confront your emotions, you are healing a deeper part of yourself. Moreover, it is crucial to surround yourself with an environment that supports your healing process. The people with whom you spend your time have a significant impact on your energy and well-being. Jung believed that our relationships are a reflection of our internal state. If you constantly surround yourself with individuals who demotivate you or reinforce negative thoughts, it will be much harder to move forward. Instead, seek connections that inspire you, remind you of your worth, and encourage you to keep growing. The process of letting go also involves redefining your identity. Many times, we tie our sense of self to a relationship or the presence of someone in our lives. We believe that without them, we are incomplete. But Jung teaches us that true wholeness does not come from external sources. It comes from our connection with ourselves. When you reconnect with yourself, you realize that you do not need anyone else to feel complete. Ask yourself, who am I outside of this relationship? What dreams, passions, and talents have I neglected while focusing on this person? Allow yourself to rediscover them. You may find that the version of yourself that emerges after this process is stronger, wiser, and more authentic than ever before. As you reconnect with yourself, you begin to notice a shift in your energy. That emotional burden you were carrying starts to dissipate, and in its place arises a sense of lightness and clarity. This is the power of letting go. It not only frees you from the weight of the past, but also opens you up to new possibilities. Carl Jung once said that life is not about avoiding suffering, but about finding meaning in every experience. And when you find that meaning, something magical happens. You transform your pain into wisdom. In this process, it is essential to cultivate practices that strengthen your internal connection. One powerful tool is writing. Take a moment to put your thoughts on paper. Write without filters, allowing your emotions to flow freely. Ask yourself, what has this relationship taught me about myself? What parts of myself do I want to embrace, and which do I need to heal? This exercise not only provides clarity, but also serves as a channel to release the emotions you've been holding inside. Another powerful practice is visualization. Imagine that you are letting go of this relationship as if it were a rope you've been tightly holding on to. Watch as it drifts away, carrying with it all the pain, attachment, and expectations that have been holding you back. In its place, visualize a radiant light filling that empty space, symbolizing your renewal. These kind of exercises are not just symbolic. They have a real impact on your mind and your energy. It is also essential to be patient with yourself. The path to healing is not linear. There will be days when you feel like you have taken enormous steps forward, and others when it seems like you are moving backward. But remember, every step, even the smallest ones, is part of your progress. Carl Jung believed that the soul has its own rhythm of healing, and forcing the process only creates more resistance. Learning to trust time and your own ability to overcome this challenge is crucial. Once you begin to free yourself from attachment, something truly extraordinary happens. You start seeing life from a completely new perspective. Jung referred to this as the process of individuation, a journey toward becoming who you truly are, free from external influences that distort your essence. This is a profoundly liberating experience because it brings you back to yourself. You realize that you are enough, that you have always been enough, and that you do not need to cling to anyone to feel whole. At this stage, it is common to experience a mix of emotions. On one hand, there is joy and liberation, but on the other, there may be an unsettling sense of emptiness. However, this emptiness is not something to fear. It is something to embrace. It is a fertile space, ready to be filled with new experiences, meaningful connections, and fresh dreams. Jung believed that emptiness is a prelude to creativity. So instead of resisting it, use it as an opportunity to reinvent yourself. One of the greatest gifts this process will give you is the ability to connect with others from a place of authenticity. You will no longer feel the need to seek validation or to hide parts of yourself just to be accepted. This not only transforms your relationships, but also allows you to attract people who are truly aligned with you. When you present yourself to the world as you truly are, the universe responds by bringing you connections and opportunities that resonate with your truth. When you begin to live from your authenticity, you realize something deeply transformative. You no longer need to hold on to the past to define your worth or your identity. Carl Jung believed that much of our suffering comes from identifying with what we have lost rather than with what we can create. This shift in perspective allows you to take control of your life and focus on what is yet to come, rather than remaining trapped in what is already past. The key to overcoming someone who still lingers in your mind is not in forgetting them, but in integrating what they represented into your growth. Every relationship you have had, every experience, whether good or bad, serves a purpose in your life. Jung teaches us that these interactions act as mirrors, reflecting aspects of our own psyche that we have yet to explore. When you understand this, you transform pain into growth, and what once seemed like a loss turns into an opportunity for expansion. A crucial part of this process is recognizing the expectations you place on that person. Often, attachment is not really about the person themselves, but about what they represented in your life. Maybe you believe they were the key to your happiness, your stability, or your sense of belonging. But the truth, as Jung emphasized, is that everything you seek outside of yourself already exists within you. That emptiness you were trying to fill with another person is nothing more than a disconnection from yourself. Reconnecting with yourself requires courage and a willingness to look inward. It is a journey that may be uncomfortable, but it is also profoundly liberating. Jung spoke about the importance of facing the shadows we try to avoid, those aspects of our psyche that we would rather ignore. When you confront them, you realize that the shadows are not your enemies. They are teachers, showing you what needs healing and guiding you toward a deeper understanding of who you truly are. At this point, you might ask yourself, how can I face my shadows? One effective way is through self-observation. Pay close attention to your thoughts and emotions, especially those that arise in the presence of that particular person. What recurring themes appear? Are there underlying insecurities or fears? By observing without judgment, you begin to unravel the patterns that have kept you trapped. Another powerful approach is practicing forgiveness, not only toward the other person, but also toward yourself. We often carry guilt for what we did or failed to do in a relationship, punishing ourselves with thoughts like, I should have done more, or if only I had been different. But Jung reminds us that every experience, even mistakes, is part of our path to growth. Forgiving yourself is an act of love and liberation. As you move forward on this journey, it is also essential to establish new emotional boundaries. This does not mean becoming cold or distant, but rather learning to protect your energy. When you allow someone to live in your mind constantly, you are giving away your power. Reclaiming that power requires consciously deciding where to focus your attention and energy. This not only strengthens you, but also prepares you for healthier, more balanced relationships in the future. The process of letting go is not a final destination, but an ongoing journey. Every step you take toward healing brings you closer to your true essence, and along the way, you discover that life has a natural rhythm of giving and receiving, of learning and releasing. When you embrace this flow, you realize that you do not need to cling to anything to be happy. Everything you need to live a fulfilling life is already within you. As you continue to deepen this journey of freedom and self-discovery, it is crucial to remember that the act of letting go is not an act of rejection, but an affirmation of your worth and your right to live in peace. Carl Jung emphasized that personal growth cannot occur while you remain trapped in a constant struggle with the past. Letting go does not mean erasing what was, but rather integrating those experiences as essential chapters of your story, allowing them to strengthen you rather than limit you. A crucial aspect of this process is learning to listen to your intuition. Jung described intuition as a direct connection to the unconscious, an internal guide that is always available to lead you toward what is best for you. However, in the noise of everyday life, this voice is often drowned out. It is necessary to make space to hear it, whether through meditation, contemplation in nature, or simply dedicating silent moments to be with yourself. When you allow yourself to listen, you will notice that your intuition does not pull you toward the past but propels you forward. It invites you to release the emotional chains that bind you and to trust that what lies ahead will be better. This trust is fundamental because, many times, we cling to what is familiar out of fear of the unknown. But Jung reminds us that true growth only happens when we dare to face the uncertain with courage. The power of this approach lies in its ability to transform not only your perspective, but also your reality. According to Jung, what we experience in the external world is a direct reflection of our internal world. If you are trapped in patterns of pain, frustration, or attachment, those emotions will likely manifest in your relationships and daily experiences. But by working on your inner self, by healing and letting go, you begin to notice a tangible shift in what you attract and how you feel. This change is not just emotional, it is energetic. Every time you choose to free yourself from an attachment, you are making space for something new in your life. It's like clearing weeds from a garden. By removing what no longer serves you, you allow the flowers to grow stronger. This is the essence of synchronicity, one of the most fascinating concepts introduced by Jung. When you are aligned with yourself, the universe responds in unexpected ways, bringing into your life people, opportunities, and experiences that reflect your new vibration. At this stage, you begin to feel a renewed sense of purpose. You no longer define yourself by what you have lost, but by what you are building. This is a powerful moment to set new goals, explore forgotten passions, and reconnect with what truly makes you happy. Allow yourself to dream big, knowing that you are now in a stronger emotional place to pursue those dreams. A crucial aspect of this process is surrounding yourself with a supportive community. Jung believed that while inner work is personal, healthy relationships are fundamental to our well-being. Seek out people who share your values, who inspire you, and who motivate you to keep growing. These connections will not only provide support, but also remind you that you are not alone on this journey. Finally, remember that letting go does not mean you will never think about that person or that relationship again. Memories may resurface from time to time, and that's okay. What matters is how you choose to respond to them. Instead of letting them pull you back into the past, use them as reminders of how far you have come and the strength you have gained. As you continue on this path of self-discovery and liberation, you will realize that every step forward not only brings you closer to your authentic self, but also inspires those around you. Carl Jung said that when one person transforms, everything around them changes. This process is not just a gift to yourself, but also to the people in your life. By facing your shadows, releasing attachments, and embracing your authenticity, you become a living example of what it means to truly live. Imagine for a moment what your life would be like if you stopped carrying the weight of the past. Picture waking up each day with a sense of lightness, with the certainty that you are aligned with your purpose, and with the freedom to create the life you truly desire. This is not an unattainable dream. It is a reality you can build by making the right decisions, one at a time. Letting go of someone who still lingers in your mind is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of an exciting new chapter. By integrating everything we have explored today, it becomes clear that the process of healing and releasing is not just an act of letting go, but also a creation. You are building a life based on your truth, your peace, and your purpose. And on this journey, every decision you make, every step you take, will be a testament to your strength and commitment to yourself. Now, I invite you to reflect on what we have shared. What steps are you willing to take today to begin freeing that person from your mind? What dreams, goals, or projects have you put on hold that you are now ready to pursue? Your transformation begins with decision, and that decision is in your hands. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to be part of this growing community. Share this video with someone who needs it, someone struggling to let go, or who needs to be reminded of their own power. Every time you share content like this, you are helping more people discover these tools and reflections that can change lives. Leave your thoughts in the comments. What part of this message touched your heart? What actions are you willing to take after hearing it? I would love to read your experiences and reflections. Remember, your words could be the encouragement someone else needs to take a step toward their own transformation. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss future messages like this. Every interaction matters, not just to help this content reach more people, but to create a community where we can all grow together. Change begins with you, and by sharing your light, you inspire others to find their own. Thank you for being here, for being part of this journey, and for choosing to transform your life from within. See you in the next video. Until then, remember, your power to change your reality is always within you.